Good evening, everyone. This is Kip Nicely on behalf of the Gary Johnson 2012 for President campaign. I want to welcome you this evening from all across the country. Special shout out to the veterans out there here on Veterans Day, and thank you for joining with us tonight. This is the second Yowie event that we've had. We're really glad to have you here tonight. And this is the first one that is topic oriented. It is going to be a presentation with Governor Johnson as well as with the organization from Fair Tax, which, as most of you know, is the tax plan that he has advocated on behalf of his presidency run. Fair Tax is a nonprofit, so I want to make the disclaimer that they're not here in an official endorsement of the campaign, but they have agreed to come on and explain what the details of it, and it's going to go on for a few minutes once we get Phil online. Phil Hinson is a spokesperson for the national organization, and he's going to be on for a few minutes, and then feel free to fire away like you do every time to Governor Johnson, excuse me, and if we can, try to keep the topic somewhat oriented toward the tax structure and economics as much as possible on this one. We're going to be going through a whole litany of topics over the next few weeks and months, including education plan, social issues, you name it, down the line. But tonight is more geared toward the fair tax. So, folks, I guess while Phil is coming online, this is the topic is fair tax. You can look it up, fairtax.org, but let's watch his presentation. It's really going to be eye-opening, and you're going to see why Governor Johnson has endorsed this plan. And get your questions ready.
Let me get started here by saying that as President of the United States, I'm making 3 promises. I might add that as Governor of New Mexico, I made very few promises, but I made good on all the promises that I did make. The 3 promises that I'm making as President of the United States is, number 1, I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I do this because I'm in the camp that believes that we're on the verge of a monetary collapse, that we need to stop printing money, that the mathematics of continuing to spend more money than what we take in are going to have a consequence of a breakdown in our currency. The last country to experience, I think, a monetary collapse, a big country, was Russia. I don't think we're immune from the same thing happening here in this country. So to prevent a monetary collapse, we need to stop printing money. To prevent this from happening in this country, we need to balance the budget. So I'm promising to submit a balanced budget. Now, that isn't to say that Congress will go along with that, but I'm promising to submit a balanced budget, a document that's going to lay out a 43% reduction in federal spending, and we could talk about that this evening. Secondly, I'm promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. You could argue that, well, they'll just override your veto. They're going to have to override the veto. Keep in mind, I would have been elected president by promising to submit a balanced budget. It's what people would want should I be elected. And I'm also promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I suggest to you that in this scenario that I just laid out, spending will be less than any other scenario that you could possibly come up with. Lastly, I'm promising to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system and replacing it with the fair tax. We do have Phil on tonight. I hope he's able to come on, but the fair tax, very simply, is, as the name implies, it's fair. The more money you make, the more fair tax you'll pay. It will also promote savings. It'll apply to new goods and services. It'll be a 23% federal consumption tax. It'll do away with the income tax. It'll do away with corporate tax. It'll do away with payroll withholdings. It'll do away with the IRS. It's revenue neutral, so we still need to cut government spending, but there are a lot of ramifications that go along with the flat tax that are, the fair tax, that are very exciting. One of them is with a zero corporate tax rate environment, why would tens of millions of jobs not be created in this country by the private sector in an environment of zero corporate tax? The other theory that I think is not a theory, but with the fair tax, is the notion that embedded in the current cost of all goods and services is a 23% tax. So basically, if you take a can of Coke today that sells for $1, the estimate is that 23 cents of that dollar is embedded tax. So by implementing the fair tax, in a very short amount of time, you're going to bleed that 23 cents out, if not immediately. The Coke won't sell for $1 because Coca-Cola won't have to sell it for $1 to make a profit, the same profit. They'll be able to sell it for 80 cents. So the notion is that over a very short amount of time, this actually ends up being cost neutral. When it comes to China and the fact that there may be unfair trade practices from China, look, we're going to bleed out 23% of the cost of goods in this country. The fair tax will apply to all imported goods and services into this country, but it makes American goods a lot less expensive. It also issues a prebate check to everyone in the country, basically $200 a month, so that everyone in the country receives $2,400 a year to be able to pay the fair tax up to the point of the poverty level, so it's not regressive. So maybe I can start answering questions on the fair tax, and when Phil does get on, which I have to believe that he will, he can certainly perhaps articulate this better than I have. This is a proposal that's been around since 2007, and I think it really reboots the American economy for what will be 100 years of prosperity. I was on Wall Street last week, 2 weeks ago, Occupy Wall Street, and there is an outrage in this country over the fact that this country isn't a level playing field. Some individuals, some corporations pay tax, some don't. Politicians take money and dole out favors, and that's just the reality, and that's not what this country is supposed to be about. Implementing the fair tax, like I say, is, as the name implies, it's fair. The more money you spend, the more fair tax you'll pay. It's revenue neutral, so we still need to cut government expenses, and it also promotes savings. So we're going to try and stop printing money, but if we have to borrow, it could be U.S. citizens saving all that much more money in an economy now that's going to really allow us to vote with our consumption dollars, not be taxed on our income. So Brian, I was asked, how does the fair tax affect farmers? Let's see, what chance do you think of getting the fair tax implemented with a Congress that supports a progressive tax? Look, if I'm elected president, advocating the fair tax as one of 3 promises is not that the American people shouting that they want reform when it comes to our tax system, and in fact, doesn't have Congress have to take a really, really hard look at the fair tax, and with a president having the bully pulpit to be able to advocate on the part of the fair tax? Look, Congress may not go along with that, but if they don't, I think they're going to have hell to pay at when it comes to re-election time. And that's the reality of politics. You want to stand up against the will of the people? Go ahead. Let's see, Brian, you're up.
Yes, sir. That was my question. I was asking about how does it affect the farmers, because that was the gentleman at work, because I was talking about the fair tax, how I didn't like the concept, but he was asking me about just since so many subsidies go to farmers and things of that nature, I was just curious, how does it affect them?
Yeah, well, subsidies are going to go away. I mean, subsidies go away. Costs. And if Phil were on the line here, he could answer that directly. You as a business, as a farm, you're not going in the farming business. You're not going to pay to have to deliver your goods to market. Your product is going to only be subject to the fair tax at the point of consumption, which would be the grocery store, if that's your question.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I wanted to know, because the guy at work, he was just wondering, so many farmers, and I hope I remember how he stated it, but he's like, they depend so much on the government. I'm not really big into subsidies because I see how it sometimes raises prices, if I understand, like with sugar and things of that nature. So, and that's what he was just wondering, how that would affect it. But no, I think you answered pretty good.
As President of the United States, and getting back to my promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress, that is going to entail a 43% reduction in government spending. The way I look at farm subsidies currently is that they should be phased out, but in that initial document to balance the budget, I, at this point, am advocating a 43% reduction in farm subsidy.
All right, sounds good.
Matthew, you're up.
Thanks, Gary. My question is basically, what makes the fair tax a better tax than what some of the other candidates are proposing? Why do you think people should vote for you based upon the fair tax rather than them based upon their sales flat taxes?
Well, really, don't take this in the context of voting for me. The fair tax really is the way, the sales here is the fair tax. Income tax started out as a flat tax, and look what we've got now. So, in my opinion, advocating a flat tax is just going to ultimately evolve to where we're currently at now. When you talk about Herman Cain's plan, look, he's adding a national sales tax onto corporate tax at 9% and income tax at 9%. I think it needs to be fair. Let's do away with income tax and corporate tax and implement a one-time federal consumption tax, like I say, of 23%. If corporate tax is good at 9%, imagine, in my opinion, what happens when it goes to 0%. You set the ground, you lay the playing field for tens of millions of jobs here in this country, as opposed to anywhere else in the world, and I do think we have Philip on.
Yes.
Good. I'm glad you made it.
Thank you. Sorry for being late. Can you hear me, Governor?
Yes, and Phil will give you the microphone to give a pitch on the fair tax.
Sure. I'll just go through a brief thumbnail sketch of it. The fair tax is a comprehensive proposal that replaces all federal income and payroll-based taxes with an integrated approach, including a progressive national retail sales tax, a prebate to ensure no American pays federal taxes on spending up to the poverty level, dollar-for-dollar federal revenue neutrality, and through companion legislation, the repeal of the 16th Amendment. The Fair Tax Act, which is H.R. 25 in the House and S13 in the Senate, is nonpartisan legislation. It abolishes all federal, personal, and corporate income taxes, gift, estate, capital gains, alternative minimum, Social Security, Medicare, and self-employment taxes, and replaces them with one simple, visible federal retail sales tax administered primarily by existing state sales tax authorities. The fair tax taxes us only on what we choose to spend on new goods and services, not on what we earn. The fair tax is fair, efficient, transparent, and intelligent, and an intelligent solution to the frustration and inequity of the current tax system. It enables workers to keep their entire paychecks, enables retirees to keep their entire pensions, refunds in advance the tax on purchases of the basic necessities, allows American products to compete fairly. It brings transparency and accountability to tax policy. It ensures Social Security and Medicare funding. It closes all loopholes and brings fairness to taxation. It also abolishes the IRS. I would say that there are two broad areas that the fair tax has benefits in. I tend to think of it in terms of economic stimulus and political reform. The fair tax addresses a whole broad range of adverse economic trends that the current system exacerbates. Included in those is an enormous trade deficit, the spiral of complexity and higher compliance costs that we have in this nation, and a number of others. The political reform, I've come to believe, is just about as important as the economic stimulus that it would provide, because Washington has become just teeming with lobbyists, and a big part of their job is to exchange campaign cash for tax preferences, and the code has become so overgrown and so burdensome that nobody can understand it as a result of that. And so in order to clean up Washington, the currency that's used to pay for the enormous amounts of cash that has to be raised for congressional campaigns has to be addressed, and the fair tax is the simplest and easiest way to do that. So I could say a lot more, but I know you want to have questions, Governor, so I'll just stop there.
That was terrific. So we'll continue with questions. Dave, you're up.
Hey, thank you, Governor. I read about you on the 420 Times website the other day, so we're big supporters of you. I had a question about home loan interest deductions. Does that still happen under your fair tax plan?
No, that's gone. That's gone. All any deduction. Look, you're not going to pay income tax anymore. You're not going to pay no withholdings from your payroll check. That all comes out of the fair tax. So these are the loan interest is one of those. If you want to call it the biggest loophole that exists available to everyone. You're laughing. What's your criticism?
No, the biggest loophole. You know, it is kind of a scam in a way. That it's jacking up the prices of homes. Being able to deduct them, I would imagine.
There is, I think, a misconception.
Phil, I would love you to chime in.
Let me jump in here, Governor. There is a misconception that the reason that people buy homes and the reason they give to charities is because of tax benefits. That's just a myth. The fair tax would have a number of other very beneficial impacts on home purchases. For example, interest rates would go down by between 25 and 33%. People would be having their entire paychecks, and the biggest barrier to most people moving into a new home is saving up enough money to get into that to afford the down payment. And so in a fair tax world, it is a paradigm shift. People would have to think in different terms, but the home construction industry would do extremely well under the fair tax.
All right.
You know, you don't need a deduction when you get to keep all the money that you make. You're getting to keep all the money that you make. You don't need a deduction from being able to keep all the money that you earn.
All right. Thank you, Governor, and keep pounding away to try and get into these debates. You know, we're really rooting for you out here.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dave. Will Johnson.
Thanks, Governor Johnson. My question is has to do with how is tax actually collected? If I'm earning $4,000 a month, where am I paying taxes?
You're paying taxes on every time you consume any new goods and services. That will be 23%, but the belief is that embedded in all goods and services now is basically a 23% tax. I go back to the example of a Coca-Cola. That if a Coca-Cola costs $1 today, 23 cents of that Coca-Cola is tax. Enact the fair tax, Coca-Cola Company is no longer going to have to sell that Coke at $1. They're going to be able to sell it at 79 cents to make the same amount of money. So the notion is that over a very short amount of time, the fair tax actually ends up being cost neutral to what we're currently paying. It makes American goods and services much more competitive on a global basis. And Phil, you are welcome to chime in anytime you want as our resident
you hit on a
expert
very
here
big
on the
benefit
fair
there.
tax.
It's the global competitiveness. And somebody asked earlier about the difference between the fair tax and the flat tax. This is an area where the fair tax has it hands down over the flat tax, because we are the only one of 30 OECD nations that has no border adjustment element in our tax system. And
OECD.
development, I think, is what it's the 30 largest economies in the world. And we're the only one of the 30 OECD nations with no border adjustment element in our tax system. What that means is we have no way of relieving our tax burden on our exports, and we do not, because of all the trade agreements we've entered into over the last 10 or 20 years, we do not tax, for the most part, imports as they arrive on our shores. So we're at a huge disadvantage against most of our trading partners who have VAT systems in place, and one of the salient features of a VAT is that it removes the tax burden on exports. There's a mechanism where you can apply for a credit on the for the goods that you ship out of the country in just about every VAT nation. So we're at a huge disadvantage in the global economy. As we all know, globalization is sweeping the planet. It is the mega force of the 21st century, and the people who've studied that say that it will be what we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg. It will change everything in a profound way. And we right now have one of the worst tax systems on the planet from a global competitiveness standpoint. The fair tax would move us into first place.
Thank you, Philip. Go on to the next question. Willard.
Yeah, I was wanting to know who can abolish the IRS. Does it take a congressional approval, or can it be done by the president? How does that work? And what's the timeline for doing so?
Well, I'll get Philip to also concur with this, but contained in the fair tax legislation is abolishment of the IRS. It also repeals the 16th
It repealed
Amendment,
Internal Revenue Code,
which allows for
and
the
it also
collection of
abolishes
income
the IRS
tax.
over a period of time. Now, we believe that'll take about 5 years, because the IRS will still.
Okay, so
the IRS works in retrospect. In other words, the IRS right now is working on tax years 2010, 2009, so on and so forth. And it will take several years to wind down the work that they're doing from the period before the fair tax is implemented. But we think within 5 years the IRS will be completely gone.
Okay, thank you.
Next question. Bill Herman. Okay, can't hear you, Bill, but I do have your question here. Is there a fair tax on buying a home? Phil, I'll get you to concur on this, but the fair tax applies to new housing, but not resale of existing homes. And Phil, for resale of existing homes, the fair tax does not apply.
That's correct.
Thank you. Erebus.
Hello. I was suggested to you by Donna Rowe of Youth in Transition in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been following your campaign, and I have to say that you're definitely the one that I'm going to vote for. My question stems from the fact of keeping jobs in the USA and taxing jobs sent overseas. And now, does the fair tax policy follow that?
The fair tax is really going to reboot the American economy. If in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs in this country, nothing else will. I mean, this is really the reboot of the American economy for the next 100 years. I mean, this is really an exciting notion. Other countries are going to have to follow.
Okay, that sounds great. I've always heard from people, about doing that, and from what I'm hearing from you now, I mean, this is sounding very exciting.
It is very exciting. It really is exciting.
Thank you, Governor Johnson. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Lee, you're up. Lee goes it.
Hi.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
I want to ask you if you become president, will you really legalize marijuana and industrial hemp? It seems millions of jobs and tax revenues would be created if this were to happen. And I'm hoping you are the candidate that finally has the courage to do so.
Well, I'm making a couple promises. One is to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I think that would be the American people shouting, "We want a balanced budget." I'm promising to veto expenditures that exceed revenue. I think that's shouting that we really do want restraint in spending. I'm promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax. I think that's the American people saying, "We want the fair tax." And among other things, I advocate legalizing marijuana. I think that's the American people shouting that they want reform when it comes to drugs. And yes, I think that legalizing marijuana, putting that economy above board, subjecting it to the fair tax, will create $10 billion. That would be the national tax on marijuana. It would be subject to the fair tax. States would be left, another point that we've kind of left out, state taxes remain in place. So states still have the power to implement whatever taxes they deem necessary as exists today. So property tax, I dare say, is still going to exist, and perhaps state income tax, but I'll go so far as to think that states will refrain from income tax because so much of state income tax policy mirrors federal tax policy and the reporting that goes along with federal tax policy. Bill, you want to add to that? You don't have to answer the marijuana part of it, but Lee, thank you very much. Mohammed.
Oh, hello, Governor. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I have a question for people who would like to join your campaign and help up with either the technical stuff, such as the internet and advertisement online, or with helping with economic debates and issues like that. How can we join?
Well, I really appreciate the offer. Let me tell you right now that we're just slammed with offers such as yourself, and I very much appreciate that. Right now, we're being outspent at least 100 to 1 by a number of the candidates that are running for this office. So it's a chicken and egg thing. We're being slammed gratefully with offers such as yourself, and we're unable to have the resources to be able to tap what you're offering. So more than anything, this is about exceeding expectation, doing well in the polls. And of course, you can't do well in the polls if you're not even in the polls. So these are the things that I need you to work on, if you would, which is lobbying polling organizations to ask them just to include my name in the polls. And then money is, I'm afraid, so much of this equation. It's the reality that if you have money, you can actually get more name familiarity, and we've got a lot of expertise on how to raise name familiarity and be able to garner votes from just having a little bit of money to spend on advertising, which in essence simply shines a light on what it is that I'm saying and doing. So thank you very much.
I was wondering, because I'm also a Ron Paul supporter as well, and was wondering, do you have any plans to join him in the near future?
I think that Ron Paul has said that if he were the nominee, that he would be appointing a vice president that would be a pro-life candidate, and I fundamentally believe that it's a woman's right to choose, and so I don't think Ron Paul is going to want me to join up with him.
I see. Well, thank you very much.
James' question, text question, if the fair tax doesn't tax used goods, does that also apply to recycled goods? Well, if recycled goods are new, they're going to be subject to the fair tax. But the fair tax really is, I think, a green initiative. because it doesn't tax used goods. All of the goods that we currently own take on a little bit more value because there might be an actual market for somebody to buy those goods. For example, your toaster. Today we might be throwing away that toaster. Tomorrow, with the fair tax implemented, we might put that on Craigslist and there might be a buyer for it. So this really takes all the consumerism that we've had in this country and makes sure that we use everything up before it ends up in the landfill. I just think it's an exciting concept from that standpoint. You look at used cars that are in people's yards that none of them are operating. I think you implement the fair tax. I think those cars get cleaned up. I think good rubber gets put on the wheels, and
people stop buying new stuff because you got to pay the tax on the new stuff, and you don't have to pay the tax on the old stuff. But the market will sort all that out, and over time, the relationship between new and used goods is going to be pretty much the same as it is now.
Thank you. Next question, Willard, you're up.
Yeah, I guess my question was just basically answered. I just, was wondering why buy new things when you can buy used things and not have to pay the fair tax. Will it actually discourage the production of new goods?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be an element at all. We're always, we're an innovative. We're innovative. We continue to produce better goods and services, and there's going to always be a market for that. Over a short period of time, this should end up to be cost neutral. It's an exciting prospect.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, you're up. What's up?
Hi, Gary. Hi, everybody. My question may have become a little bit redundant. It was originally, my question was going to be, won't there be an immediate constriction or contraction of the consumer marketplace hitting the economy pretty hard when the fair tax is implemented? I have a companion question, I guess, because that one was sort of addressed already, I guess, by the long-term benefits. But the other question is, how would the fair tax apply to services and work for hire? Like if I were to do consulting work or contract design work for somebody, or legal services, would that be taxed with the fair tax?
That would be taxed. That would be taxed with the fair tax, but keep in mind that
but Governor, the other
you're having to gauge the cost of your services.
And so if I were hired by a corporation to do work for hire for them, it would be it would not be
taxed. No, the fair tax would not apply. If it would not be taxed. Right, Phil. Great point. Business-to-business transactions are not taxed. It's the end product to the consumer. So if you are a consultant to a company, no, the fair tax does not apply to your consulting to that company. If you consult to the public, your services will be taxed.
Yeah, they look at whether it's personal consumption. They don't want to create an incentive for companies to start buying all kinds of things for their employees to use for personal consumption. So you don't want your employer to start buying groceries that you take home from work so that you can avoid the sales tax.
Okay, so it would just be with the end consumer that the tax would be taxable at that point, including energy costs. Okay, great. And thank you. And Governor, best of luck.
John, you're up. I'm going to read your question. I have a fair tax ad proposal that I think would get you considerable attention. Who should he contact? GaryJohnson2012.com. Thank you. Text question from William. The fair tax will be a boost to bringing back cosmetic manufacturing. Would you take it further and repeal minimum wage? I support repeal of minimum wage. I think that it's outdated. I think it's punitive, and really we're talking about kids now that might be able to work that currently aren't. Mike Hansen, text question: do you support tariffs on foreign goods to keep enterprise competitive at home? Look, I am not the tariff guy. And let's keep in mind that the fair tax implementing the fair tax makes U.S. goods and services that much more competitive. Currently, with the fair tax, all imports into the United States are going to be subject to the fair tax.
Governor, there's some indication the Chinese have already retaliated against S-1619, even though it's only passed the Senate. It hasn't passed the House, and it hasn't been signed into law by the President. The other problem is the World Trade Organization, which is an organization that we joined as part of NAFTA back in the 90s, has the authority and has exercised the authority in the past to slap fines on us if we are guilty of discriminatory trade practices. So what we say is, why do you want to risk the unintended consequences of adopting discriminatory trade practices when we have a tax system that discriminates against our producers right now? And by implementing the fair tax, we level the playing field and we get rid of our policies which hurt our domestic producers before we even start trying to retaliate against other countries.
Thank you, Phil. Next question. John, you're up.
Yeah, so really enjoyed the discussion, Governor, and appreciate your time tonight.
Sure.
Real quick, I just want to know, to me, the problem right now seems like in Washington, out of control spending. And I don't agree with the current tax code, and I think it's run amok, but I also think spending is run amok as well. So how does the fair tax, or how will it control spending in Washington?
It totally gets rid of the games that our Congress plays right now, where they play off one group of taxpayers against another and give special treatments to others, and they also obscure the true cost, because so much of the taxes that we pay are embedded in the cost of the items that we purchase. So no one in America really knows what their true tax burden is. That will change under the fair tax, and the whole notion of equal treatment under the law will once again be extended to our tax laws, and I don't think anybody would say that that is the case today.
John, did you have a follow-up?
Phil hit it.
Thank you very much. Phil, thank you.
Well, there was allegedly, when Bill Archer was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee some years ago, there was supposedly an economic study done by Princeton Econometrics, and they polled Fortune 500 companies, and they asked them how would they change their business planning to accommodate the fair tax. And something like, I don't know, 75% said they would build their next plant in the United States, and 25% said they would relocate their corporate headquarters to the United States.
Whether they would
no one has ever been able to find a copy of that study, so we've stopped using it to promote the fair tax. And to my knowledge, that's the only time that's ever been done.
David.
How are you doing? I'm one of your volunteers, actually. I'm in Minnesota. How are you?
David, you.
I'm curious to know. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm curious to know if there are any downsides to the fair tax that I should know about.
I don't know of any. Phil, do you know of any downsides here? Isn't this? You know, I'm not operating in a vacuum here. Jeff Myron is my economics advisor, PhD, Harvard, free market economist, a little bit of an oxymoron there, Harvard, but has a book on the bookshelves right now, Libertarianism A through Z. But I think Jeff is really highly regarded, and what he has to say about the fair tax is that it's exactly as the name implies. It's fair. You make more money, the more fair tax you'll pay. It'll also promote savings. I suppose there's going to be something on the downside, but I don't. I think this is the best. This is the best tax system that's ever been thought up, and if I were to hear better, I would shift gears tomorrow and be promoting that better tax system. But it doesn't. There's not a proposal out there that is a better proposal. John Nelson. John, I would just say that you're saying right now that you're not paying any tax, and if I heard your question right, you want to know how this is going to benefit you because you're not paying currently any tax.
No,
and that you're retired.
It has nothing to do with it. No, it's not how it benefits me. I'm pretty much retired, and I pretty much don't make an income on purpose. But But when my taxes hit 40% of my total income, that seems excessive in this environment. I mean, I know back in the
got
60s,
it, John. I'm sorry, John. I really had misunderstood what you said. I completely agree with what you're saying. I just think that for my point, not to you, but for someone who might think that they're through paying taxes, look, if you're a retiree and you get a prebate check and all you have to do are buy those minimal consumables, the prebate check ought to cover all of that, and you ought to be able to keep everything that you have in the bank currently. And then we're back to the fact that it's arguably going to be cost neutral over a short period of time. Anyway, thank you, John. I'm sorry that I misunderstood your question to start with.
Oh no, that's fine. It's just that when I paid almost 46% of my income in taxes, I thought that that was probably sufficient. But I actually had the government come after me because they said in 1996 I was 13,000 short. So I finally figured out that the best thing for me to do is just quit. Stop it. Stop working. Stop doing anything. And you know what happened? I started making a living doing nothing. I got a $14,000 check in the mail.
So, John, I think that what you've said is what we all experience, and that is that anything you tax, you get less of. So, what is it that we currently tax? We tax income, and we get less of it. And you're just one of a million examples that exist in that area. Thanks. Back to Kip.
All right, hey folks, Kip Nicely here. I know it says Alexandra O'Rourke on the screen, but that's my niece. I've got her laptop. I want to, those of you who I didn't get to the very beginning, I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall. This is our second one on Yowie.com. It's just been great. I've been reading through these live chats, and the questions are just first class all the way. I've seen questions from Canada to Australia, England, and a whole bunch of states. So we've got a really good participation here tonight. Couple things I want to just talk to you about. The campaign is going full speed, and we are, as Gary mentioned, we are spending 1/50th to 1/100th of what the other campaigns are. We're really efficient in each of our dollars, and whatever we can get in from you would really be appreciative. Two numbers have been thrown out tonight. One of them is the fair tax, which is a 23% consumption tax, and the other one is the deficit need to be reduced by 43%. So I want to make a challenge to each of you tonight, and I saw this a suggestion on the live chat, I think from John. It's a great suggestion. Listen, if you all can put in $23, we would appreciate it, or in go along with the fair tax, or if you want to donate $43, which is the amount that Governor Johnson will reduce the budget by, that would be terrific. So your choice, $23, $43, or if you're really wealthy tonight, we'll make it $66. Go to GaryJohnson2012.com, hit the donate button. It would be so much appreciative. There has not been a vote cast yet, and we can really make some noise and make a difference. You talked about exceeding expectations. When we're not included in the debates, we come out of New Hampshire on fire. They're going to hear about us nationwide, and we can really use your help, and that money will be spent well. I give you my word, every dollar will be spent extremely well. The this national town hall, we're doing these topic-wise. Tonight is the first topic. As I mentioned in the outset, Phil Hinson is here, and we really appreciate his participation on behalf of Fair Tax. They are a nonprofit organization, and they cannot officially endorse us, but we really appreciate his expertise, and this is the tax plan that Governor Johnson advocates as the next president of the United States. It's a great plan, and your questions have been out of this world. So keep asking. I appreciate you staying on topic tonight. Two things. Again, if you can go to his website, if you feel so inclined, we'd really appreciate a donation tonight. And second thing, go to fairtax.org. Check it out, what it has to say, and I think you're going to be convinced that is the way to go. And you know, it just takes a little spark to get this movement going. Tell some friends, get on your social media, talk to other folks. We've got groups all over the country here listening in tonight. We got a nice group down in Virginia. Charles and Robert, shout out to y'all. I know you've got a good group there, and I'll turn it back over to Hardy, the maestro of all this, and Governor Johnson, and with Philip's help. Thanks for joining in tonight. We'll get going again. Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton and the other founding fathers who were students of taxation believed that direct taxes, such as an income tax, were the tools of tyrants and despots, while indirect taxes, such as sales taxes, were more compatible with freedom and liberty. And that was the prevailing philosophy that, with a couple of minor exceptions, that this country operated under until 1913, when the 16th Amendment was ratified, and Congress saw fit to overturn the judgment of the Founding Fathers. We believe that the Founding Fathers got it right, and we believe that Congress in 1913 got it wrong, and we don't think there's anything in the 98-year history of income tax now that would indicate otherwise.
But Phil, there is nothing. I mean, I'm hearing the logical argument why Congress won't do it, but Congress could up the fair tax.
I mean, they in 1913 they decided to not listen to the founding fathers and implement, you know, the income tax. So what's then stopped them from, you know, saying, oh, this 23% tax is great. Let's add something else.
Well, basically, when everyone is paying the same rate, and it's much more visible than it is now, we believe that the political pressure on Congress will be to keep the rate down.
Well, Elizabeth, I'm gonna go along with Phil on this one. Is that when the only tax is a 23% consumption tax, and there is a proposal to raise it by 1% to 24%, I think the national outrage over that proposal would prevent it from ever happening. So,
well, I love the fair tax, but I'm just very, very, very cynical about the politicians in Congress not finding some loophole and trying to screw everybody over in the process while enriching themselves.
No, I've got it, and I'll just go back to the point that I think that Phil was making. When you have so many taxes coming at you, the income tax being one of them, that when you raise one of the so many that we encounter, it's hard to really even discern or bring focus to the fact that it even happens. There are convoluted income tax where, you know, the middle class is not going to pay any more tax when the reality is that it is, and it's so complicated that nobody actually can really determine that it is going up. And if they do determine that it's going up, it's administered so unfairly within the classes, if you will, that a big difference between that and the reality of one tax and the focus that would go into that. So I don't, perhaps I don't share in your cynicism as much.
Well, I really hope you get it, because you're the first person that I would be voting for in a presidential election since I could vote back in 1986, where I would not feel like voting for the lesser of two evils.
Oh, you made my evening. Thank you. We'll go to the next question. Let's see. Armenda.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. There are a lot of people who use their car for business trips and stuff like that and get reimbursed from income taxes with, they get tax credits for mileage they put on their vehicles and unreimbursed business expenses, and I was wondering how their tax would affect that.
So you're talking about an income tax, and you're talking about being able to get back some of your income tax. The fair tax does away with all income tax. So you're going to get your full amount of money. Thank you. How does the fair tax affect education and food? Educational services, I assume, would be subject to the fair tax. I'll ask Phil here in a second. Food would be subject to the fair tax.
I mean, if it's any sort of capital investment, it's exempt. If it's anything for personal consumption, it's taxable.
We've come to the end of the evening. I really want to thank everybody that has gotten online. I really want to thank Yowie. Phil, I really want to thank you for participating in this. I want to put a pitch out to all of you that we do have limited resources. I know we made that pitch, you know, to chip in $1, chip in 23 bucks, chip in 43 bucks. I'd also love to have your vote. I'd love to have your vote, and I'd love to have you go out and get 5 others and make that vote thing a viral thing. But more than anything, thank you very much for your participation, and hopefully we'll be doing this again soon. And at that, we will sign off.